Radio 1, 990 AM, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg.
This was an extremely hard thing for me to do.
In 2018, Christine Blasey Ford became a household name for her testimony during Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing for the U.S. Supreme Court. She joins Pia Chattopadhyay to talk about the aftermath of going public and her new memoir, One Way Back, on The Sunday Magazine, Sunday morning at 9:30 in Newfoundland, and on demand on CBC Listen.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere. Download the CBC Listen app.
This is CBC News. At 12 o'clock, we're at -8 degrees with mostly sunny skies over downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Humphrey. Manitoba's deficit forecast is now just shy of $2 billion. That's far and away the highest shortfall in Manitoba's history, except during the pandemic. The third quarter report is based on the province's finances as of the end of December. It largely attributes the worsening deficit to a continued overspend in healthcare and the settlement of some outstanding lawsuits. Winnipeg police have identified the victim of the city's latest homicide. On Tuesday, police were called to an apartment in the 800 block of Main Street for an unresponsive man. He was taken to hospital and later pronounced deceased. Police have identified him as 24-year-old Murdo Baker, originally from South Indian Lake. Winnipeg's mayor says despite the quick turnaround to get Portage and Main open to pedestrians, there will be consultations. Yesterday, City Council voted 11-3 to reopen the famous intersection. The Manitoba Trucking Association has expressed concern, especially around plans to have only buses on Portage Avenue East. Mayor Scott Gillingham says there are transit changes coming, and he says the association will have a voice.
We want to make sure that they are consulted when it would come to looking at how the transit route changes would or could affect the trucking routes as well. But that's all part of the preliminary design study, and that is, again, part of the Rapid Transit Master Plan.
Gillingham says the plan to have a transit station near Portage Avenue East will actually reduce traffic through Portage and Main through the intersection. Winnipeggers now have fewer hoops to jump through for some home improvement projects. City Council approved bylaw changes limiting the need for development permits for 25 types of construction projects. Development permits limit how land can be used, as well as the size and location of structures. The exemptions now include gazebos, detached garages, play structures, and private swimming pools or hot tubs. Most projects still require building permits and must follow other rules like size and setback requirements. And you can see more information on all this on the city's website. A 20-year-old man from Tyndall, Manitoba, is dead after a crash on Highway 44. On Wednesday, RCMP were called to the highway near Milner Ridge Road. When officers got there, they found a badly damaged vehicle and the dead man. Investigators believe the crash happened on Tuesday night around 10:30. They say the vehicle was heading west and it hit the shoulder, overcorrected, crossed the highway, and hit a tree in the ditch. Speed is believed to be a factor in the crash. The United Nations Security Council has failed to pass a U.S. resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. The resolution was tabled this morning with China and Russia voting it down. Sally Patterson has your details.
What we saw for the first time was the United States putting forward a draft resolution that explicitly called for a ceasefire. Yes, it said it wanted alongside that the release of the remaining hostages still being held in Gaza, but it used firmer language than we've seen so far over the past 5 months. The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Lisa Thomas Greenfield, said that this resolution had gone through several several rounds of consultation with fellow member states. And she said that she really thought that this had the backing that it needed. But what we saw was Russia and China use that veto vote. And it means yet again the Security Council has failed to act as a united voice. Sally Patterson for CBC News at the United Nations in New York.
It was another night of heavy Russian bombing across Ukraine. What you're hearing is the sound of a cruise missile striking Ukraine's largest dam. The full extent of the damage isn't clear at this point. Drones or missiles also hit Ukraine's largest hydroelectric facility. That has led to power outages across the country. Another hydroelectric generator, which supplies power to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, was also targeted. The overnight bombardment comes the day after Russia fired a barrage of missiles into Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital. That was the first sustained attack on the capital in more than a month. The state of New York is looking to repeal a law that's been on the books since 1907. It's the law against adultery, and it's actually been enacted in recent years with a charge laid in 2010. It was ultimately dropped, however, that charge as part of a plea deal. The repeal has passed the state assembly and now has to go to the Senate and then the governor of the state. And students who come from Shoal Lake 41st Nation in Ontario are educating Winnipeggers on where they get their water. Today is World Water Day. The students are launching a new line of merchandise at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights today. They developed a business with their teacher and have designed and created water bottles and stickers. The money raised will go to the Harvey Red Sky Memorial School Future Business Leaders Project. In Winnipeg today, a high of -6 and mostly sunny conditions. In Brandon, mainly sunny and a high of -8. Dauphin, sunshine and a high of -8. Right now, you are listening to CBC Radio 1, 990 AM, 89.3 FM.
Good afternoon, Manitoba. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, 97.9 FM in Brandon, 100.9 FM in Thompson. On your CBC Listen app, and hello to those tuning in from our CBC Manitoba YouTube live stream. Today is Friday, March 22nd. I'm Chloe Friesen filling in for Marjorie Dowhouse. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us. Lots to come here on the show, including staff at the Food Rescue Grocery in Brandon are getting ready to move into a new space. We'll hear how the larger space will help Brandonites access more healthy, affordable food. But first up, the 2024 Juno Awards are just around the corner, and there are plenty of Manitobans on the nominee list. We'll hear from Daniel Monkman, aka Zune, about how it feels to be recognized on a national scale. There will be some serious Manitoba representation at this Sunday's Juno Awards in Halifax. From Winnipeg all the way to Broken Head Ojibwe First Nation, artists are putting Treaty 1 on the national stage. Daniel Monkman, who is from Broken Head Ojibwe First Nation, is one of these artists. They are the creator of the shoegaze band Zune, and they're up for Contemporary Indigenous Artist of the Year. CBC's Shanalee Vidal spoke with Daniel shortly after his nomination was announced in February. She began by asking how they found out they were nominated.
It's not as glamorous as you think, but it was really exciting. I was in LA on tour with Kevin Drew of Broken Social Scene, and I was taking a walk with my partner up the Hollywood Hills to this observatory, and on our way there, I got a confidential, top secret email from my publicist being like, "You got to call me right now, or I'll call you. There's something I got to tell you, but only over the phone." And I remember being like, "Oh gosh, what could it be?" And then she told me the news, and I remember just jumping up and down, so excited.
But you couldn't tell anyone.
Yeah, I couldn't tell anyone. And, a couple of my close friends, I was like, "Yo, this happened." And they're like, "Oh, that's fantastic." But, it was tough keeping it a secret to the public.
Can you tell us about your album, that you've been working so hard on?
Yeah, my album is called Baka Moigan, which means, Baka in Ojibwe means to slow down. And Moigan is the wolf clan that I'm part of. That my dad had passed away, but when your father passed away, you whatever clan he is kind of yours. So I'm now part of the Wolf clan, and so I decided to name the record Bika because I made it when COVID lockdown just had happened, and everybody was settling down. No one could do anything, and life really did slow down. And I was able to grieve for my father's passing, and then Mohegan was just I wanted to honor our name, and they don't go together, but they're just two separate meanings.
What does it mean for you and your music to be recognized this way?
It's mind-blowing because the record that I make is not mainstream at all, and it doesn't really gear towards mainstream. It's actually freedom of that. It's there's a lot of new subgenres within this album that haven't been heard before. They're brand new, and the term that I coined is moccasin gaze, which is a runoff of an 80s style called shoegaze. These indie rockers would be looking at their shoes down at their effect pedals, so that they call it shoegaze, but I call it moccasin gaze because it's indigenous instrumentation mixed with all kinds of sounds. I worked with Lee Ronaldo from Sonic Youth and Owen Pallett, who writes music like that movie called Her. And so I got to work with incredible people for this record to combine contemporary sounds to sounds of the past from my culture.
And as you mentioned, like a lot of people may not have heard some of these sounds before, but I'm sure they're going to now that you've been nominated. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's been my first debut album got Polaris shortlisted, and I don't know if the Junos happened that year because of COVID, but I just didn't know if I was going to be able to put a record out that would reach the Junos. I thought my arty records would only be in the Polaris kind of universe. So for it to exist in such a mainstream area in music gives me hope that young Indigenous kids might hear it and not feel deterred or feel obligated to go to some fancy studio and work with the producers who know everything about radio, because it's not about that.
Now, how are you feeling about the other nominees in the category for Contemporary Indigenous Artist of the Year?
Oh, I love all their music. I'm very much different than all of them, and I think a lot of people would agree that. But I love seeing Indigenous people. And last year when I was nominated for Juno with my other band Ombigaze, we never got the Indigenous award or the nomination either. And I was always like, I want to be with my Nietzsche's. And so to be alongside all of them this year is just the best feeling.
Are you going to be going to Halifax for the awards?
Yeah, of course. I'm kind of shy and I like to just do my own thing, but I think this year I will try to embrace it and go meet everyone and see what it has to offer.
Daniel Monkman is the artist behind Juno-nominated band Zune. They were speaking with CBC's Shanna Lee Vidal back in February, and we won't have to wait very long to find out if Zune takes home the Juno for Contemporary Indigenous Artist of the Year. The award show airs this Sunday, just about everywhere on CBC, beginning at 7 p.m. here in Manitoba. And from their Juno-nominated album Becca Maingan, this is Zune with A Language Disappears. from their Juno-nominated album Beka Maingin. That was Zune with A Language Disappears. And tune in to the 2024 Juno Awards. They're hosted in Halifax this year on Sunday to find out if Daniel Monkman takes home the Juno.
Brady Keeper and Bridget Laquette both played here. What future star will you see this year? The Manitoba Indigenous Cultural Education Centre annual Indigenous Minor Hockey Tournament is back March 22nd to 24th at the Hockey for All Centre. The best Indigenous minor hockey players in Manitoba come together in competition, and CBC is a proud sponsor. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
It's 12:15. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Chloe Friesen, filling in for Marjorie Dowhouse. Thank you so much for joining us this Friday afternoon. Still lots to come. Do you know where your water comes from? A group of students from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Ontario wants Winnipeggers to know that it comes from their community. Coming up, we'll talk to some students and teachers from Shoal Lake 40 about what the students are presenting today at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. As well, Brandon's Food Rescue grocery store is expanding into a new space to keep up with the demand for healthy and affordable food. We'll hear what difference they hope it makes. That's coming up here on Radio Noon. Taking a look at your forecast, mainly sunny this weekend for the province, but we're dealing with some below seasonal temperatures, so I'm choosing to just focus on that sunshine. We could see a weak disturbance pushing through the province Monday, Tuesday, bringing some flurries and light snow to southern Manitoba on Monday or Tuesday. Looking at some temperatures across the province here. At the Forks here in Winnipeg, it's -7. Thompson, partly cloudy. You're sitting at -21. At the airport, -19. To Dooley Lake, -23. You're our cold spot. Gretna, you're our hot spot at -5. Brandon, at the airport, you're mainly sunny, sitting at -10. Now, we all probably know the feeling of sticker shock. Those high prices we're all seeing at the grocery store can be discouraging, especially for people living on a low income. But the Food Rescue grocery store in Brandon has been doing its best to help take the sting out of sticker shock. And Brandonites have been lining up outside the Rosser Avenue shop to get discounted deals on food. So to keep up with demand, it's about to move into a new 2,000 square foot space in the town center mall on April 3rd. Ross Robinson is the executive director of the John Howard Society of Brandon, which runs the nonprofit store. Good afternoon. Welcome to the show.
Hey, good afternoon, Chloe. Thanks for asking us to talk about our program.
Of course. Now, how does the Food Rescue grocery store work?
The Food Rescue store works on the basis that if we can think that half of the food that farmers produce goes into the landfill. And so what we do is we look at securing a fraction of that and getting it back onto people's plates. So it's working with distributors and food processors and every place of the food distribution chain to just save a little bit of that food and make it available.
How do you get this food? Is it a daily process of connecting with distributors, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So it's a lot of it is out of our control. It's when it becomes available, then we have to be on the spot to grab it. And we have to be able to get a truck together to go where it's being sourced from. We've got warehouses, climate-controlled warehouses, so we can take stuff right away and keep it frozen or fresh, refrigerated. There are some kind of scheduled events that happen throughout a week that we've locked onto with the help of our partners at Second Harvest. But really, it's as it becomes available. So we've got Hutterite colonies who will come with beets and parsnips, and we're there for them when they have to move that. We've got other products that come available, and we're there for them. So it's a weekly thing, I guess is how I put it. It's
a pretty widespread operation then. How much cheaper would you say the food is that you sell compared to regular grocery store prices?
Okay, that's a good question. So a lot of the product we get is at no cost to us, except for the expense it is to go grab it, the staffing, the rent for our space, hydro, and all the rest. what we do is of all the food that we save from going in the landfill, what we've decided is we will take a portion of that and move it through our store, which we price things at approximately 25% of retail, and that's to keep the operation going. The rest of the food that we get, we distribute to other not-for-profits in the area because we've got a huge opportunity that we can secure food on an industrial basis, which local food banks and small hamper operations in the small towns in Western Manitoba can't do. So we get it, and then we distribute it to them for free.
Wow, that's incredible. And I imagine you have a lot of conversations with people at the store who are buying food. What do you hear from them regarding the financial pressures of food these days?
You know, it's an ongoing thing. We see cost of living and inflation going up. We see that people on fixed incomes aren't getting a break. There are lots of people with other things going on in their life where food is an important, obviously critical item, but it's becoming more and more expensive. So what we're able to do, because we never know what stock we're going to have, Chloe, but what we're able to do is what we have on hand, people come shop to us first, get as much as they can, and spread their grocery dollars there. Whatever's left over, they spend back at the normal grocery store. So what we've got, though, is we've got a really tight community of people who've come to grown rather to appreciate the food rescue store. They share recipes. They tell people how to make things with parsnips or carrots or whatever those vegetables are that you don't grow up with. And but what I've seen is that what has impacted me, I guess is what I should say, is that the impact with seniors has been considerable. The ability that we have to help seniors out, is very gratifying.
Are there any stories that stick out to you from the past few years of operating this store?
I guess it's not so much stories, Chloe. It's the smiles.
It's
the attitude. It's the community. It's the happiness that people have who come through our doors. And to be honest, it's the great attitude that the volunteers and the staff have that make this work. You know, we have to keep our expenses low. And so the volunteer crowd that we have are really, really critical to keeping our store open. It's a happy, honest to good, positive atmosphere. It's not. We provide a dignified shopping experience for people, and it's an opportunity for people to feel good about themselves that they're doing their bit to help save things going from the dump and to stretch their grocery dollar at the same time.
What sort of difference do you think it makes to have the experience be a shopping experience rather than a more food bank kind of approach?
Yeah, and that's always been our projects has been based on that, on a dignified experience. What it means, Chloe, is that we get people from across all demographics. You know, there's a number of people out there who, despite how tough it might be financially, they're never going to go to a food bank. They're never going to get a hamper. They'll go hungry without doing that. So at the Food Rescue grocery store, we give people the opportunity to buy things discounted by 75% or more, and they can contribute. They get to pick and choose what they want and what they're willing to spend. And it provides an atmosphere of everybody pulling together to make things work.
And we're talking because the grocery store is actually expanding. What difference do you hope this new space is going to make?
Wow, there's so much positive with this new space, Chloe. For our shoppers, the experience is unlimited parking, covered parking. We used to have problems with people having to wait outside. That's not going to be the case anymore in our new space. We've got a large foyer where people can come inside. We used to have to restrict the number of people in the store because we were so cramped. So now we've got a larger space. We're going to be able to put more people in, have a more typical shopping experience. That's one of the great things about it. We've been donated fridges and freezers that have been in storage because we just didn't have the space in our 719 roster location. So the new location, we're going to have that out. Do you know what I'm really excited about is the experience for our staff and volunteers. We've got a proper loading bay. We can bring things out by pallets. We're not hand bombing things in and out of a pickup truck several times a day. We can just have it there, and they can stock shelves, and they can move around and not be cramped. I'm really excited about that.
I imagine there'll be a lot less bruised produce.
Let's hope so, yeah.
Ross, lastly, what do people need to know about the hours at this new space?
Yeah, so our new space, we're staying with our same hours for this current weekend, so I don't want to confuse people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hours at the new location, We're going to go Wednesday, Thursday, noon till 6, Friday, 1 till 6, and Saturdays, noon till 4. And this is all just based on the feedback that we got from our customers. What they wanted? They wanted more hours open when their kids were in school so they have more freedom to do some shopping there. We found that the traffic on Sundays wasn't really that high, and so we've closed that down so we can reallocate our resources, our volunteers and staff to hours that really make sense for our customers.
Ross, thank you so much for joining us today, and best of luck. Congrats on the new location.
Thanks so much, Chloe. Appreciate your help.
Ross Robinson is the executive director of the John Howard Society of Brandon, and the Brandon Food Rescue Grocery Store is set to open at its new location in Town Center Mall on April 3rd.
Jarrett Martineau hosts Reclaimed.
In an hour, you could hear everything from powwow music to like a soft acoustic ballad to an electronic record to like a dub track, all in the same hour from an Indigenous artist from any part of the world. Eclecticism is an overused word, obviously, but I think the sheer diversity that gets represented on the show is something that's totally unique.
Reclaimed with Jarrett Martineau. Available now on CBC Listen.
You're tuned in to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. The time is about 12:26. Thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with us. Folk duo Two Crows for Comfort have new music out ahead of this weekend. This is their latest. It's called Hearts on Your Name.
Stay out too late. Streetlights flood the summer sky. I'm in no hurry to get home. Talk all night long without even speaking to each other. You could read my mind all alone. Promise the world that we'd make it. With hearts on your name, but we break it, we break it. It was easier than these days. Move fast. I'm scared to see your face, and there's so many things I wanted to say. How's your family? Last week spoken, he was troubled. How's your brother keeping these days? Glad that you will and you made it. I say the same, but I'm faking. It was easier than these days. Loving hurts, it never works these days. These days. We could be close if I wasn't myself and I did a little better than my best. I have tendencies to drive people away, and I haven't seemed to figure it out yet. Promise my world that I'd make it. So falling down as I'm breaking. It was easier than these days. Loving hurts, it never works these days. It was easier than these days. Loving hurts, it never works these days. These days.
New music from Two Crows for Comfort. That was Hearts on Your Name. I'm Chloe Friesen here on Radio Noon, filling in for Marjorie Dowhouse. Thanks for tuning in. Taking a look at your weather quickly here. Mainly sunny this weekend for across the province, although below seasonal temperatures for this springtime season. We'll get more information from Riley Lachuk, our CBC weather specialist, coming up in a few minutes here. Also coming up, Manitoba's projected deficit continues to rise, and the province's finance minister is pointing his finger at the previous government. We'll get an update on that situation coming up, but first, your CBC local news is next.
This is CBC News. At 12:30, we're at -7 degrees with sunny skies over downtown Winnipeg. Hello there, I'm Matt Humphrey. Manitoba's deficit forecast is now just shy of $2 billion. It's far and away the highest shortfall in Manitoba's history, except during the pandemic. The third quarter report is based on the province's finances as of the end of December, and it largely attributes the worsening deficit to a continued overspend in healthcare and the settlement of some outstanding lawsuits. Winnipeg police are identifying the victim of the city's latest homicide. On Tuesday, police were called to an apartment in the 800 block of Main Street for an unresponsive man. He was taken to hospital and later pronounced deceased. Police have identified him as 24-year-old Murdo Baker, originally from South Indian Lake. Overseas, one of India's opposition leaders has been arrested less than a month from the country's general election. He's facing a corruption charge that critics of the Indian government are calling politically motivated. Priyata Brajasi has more from New Delhi.
Arvind Kejriwal's party, which is known as the Aam Aadmi Party, is a part of a 27-party opposition alliance known as the India Bloc, that is hoping to challenge Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party in the upcoming elections, which will be taking place in a few weeks. All major opposition parties in the country have come out in support of Mr. Kejriwal and have condemned the Modi government. And recently, there have been many allegations by opposition parties accusing the government of using federal machinery to crack down on opposition leaders and parties. And they say that that is having an adverse impact on their campaigns and preventing a level playing field ahead of the elections. For CBC News, this is Priyata Brajasi in New Delhi.
And we're following breaking news out of the United Nations. The UN Security Council has failed to pass a U.S. resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. The resolution was tabled this morning with Russia and China voting it down.
Russia and China simply did not want to vote for a resolution that was penned by the United States because it would rather see us fail than to see this council succeed.
That is Linda Thomas Greenfield, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. The American resolution called for an immediate and sustained ceasefire that would allow for the delivery of humanitarian aid into the beleaguered territory. But the Russian ambassador to the UN says the proposal was drafted with the intent of, quote, misleading the international community, end quote. And that is your CBC News from Winnipeg. For news anytime, head on over to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba, or Chloe.
Yeah.
What is it? The CBC News app. That's right, Chloe.
Sorry, I'm so used to saying the CBC Listen app because I love radio.
Better.
You know, I want to listen. But the CBC News app, also amazing.
But lest we forget, this Listen app. Yeah,
one's red, one's blue, so you don't mix them up on your phone.
You wouldn't want to do that.
No, it's perfect. Thanks, Matt.
Back soon.
CBC's Matt Humphrey with a look at your local news. Now it's Friday. We're going to head into the weekend, and it's on the top of everyone's minds. Mm-hmm. Riley Lachuk, what's the weather going to be like? I know we're seeing some sunshine. Will that continue?
Yeah, we're looking at a mainly sunny weekend, Chloe. However, I know with spring break getting underway, folks that have travel plans south of the border into North Dakota should probably take note to this forecast.
The road trips, Riley, not the road trips.
I only mention that because typically there's quite a few folks that like to travel south for spring break, maybe head down into North Dakota, Minnesota, that sort of thing. So taking a look at temperatures right now, really another below seasonal day across southern Manitoba. -8 in the city of Winnipeg right now. It's -9 in Brandon. Thompson's at -19 and -22s for both Tadoule Lake and Churchill. Not a lot to talk about in terms of weather in Manitoba. A little bit of high weather cloud making its way across the Hudson Bay coast. So a little bit on the cloudy side for areas like Churchill through Shamattawa. Otherwise, we're looking at a mainly sunny day. But as we get into the weekend, we are looking at mainly sunny skies for Manitoba. Things do change, though, as we get into the weekend south of the border. So we have a Colorado low that will track across.
I haven't heard that word in a while.
Yeah, I haven't heard that word in a while. Not real having a real impact on us here in Manitoba, but looking into Saturday, we start to see some light snow moving across North Dakota. That will give us a little bit of cloud here in southern Manitoba through the later part of Saturday into Sunday. As we get into Sunday, that system really travels right along the 49th parallel, right along the international border. So looking at accumulating snow through Sunday across North Dakota, South Dakota, into the Minnesota region, Minneapolis, looking at snow this weekend as well. In terms of accumulations, here in Manitoba, if we get any, it trace to a couple of centimeters really right along the international border. Kenora, Dryden, Fort Francis, 2 to 4 centimeters by the time we hit Monday midnight. But areas like Bismarck, Fargo, into the Minneapolis region, looking at 15 to 25 centimeters of snow.
Ooh.
So, yeah, that could make travel a bit of a mess if you have plans to head south, especially along the I-29 through today, Sunday, into Monday. Back here at home, winds maybe a little bit breezy at times across southern Manitoba. Otherwise, as we get through the night tonight into Saturday, we're looking at fairly calm conditions. Today's forecast, I've got -6 for Winnipeg, -7 for Brandon, sunny, -9 degrees in Dauphin, and could see with that cloud cover that's moving through along the Hudson Bay coast, maybe a couple of flurries along the Hudson Bay coast for Churchill, maybe even as far south as Gillam. Very slim chance otherwise. And into the rest of the weekend, -5 for Saturday, -2 for Sunday. Late day flurries for Monday, which end through the morning on Tuesday, and a clearing sky, and -3 for Wednesday. So the next 5 days below seasonal, but we do see kind of a mix of sun and a few snowflakes here and there.
All right. Well, I'm sure spring break travelers aren't excited to hear that news, but they're grateful that you warned them. So thank you, Riley.
Yeah, no problem.
CBC's weather specialist, Riley Lachuk, with a look at your forecast. We'll hear from Riley again later this afternoon on Up to Speed. The time is 12:37. You're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1. I'm Chloe Friesen, filling in for Marjorie Dowhouse. Manitoba's projected deficit continues to rise. Finance Minister Adrian Salas spoke with reporters today about the province's third quarter financial situation. Here's what he had to say.
We know that the previous government hid the true picture of Manitoba's books, and our administration is dealing with those inherited challenges. Today, I'm releasing the third quarter report, which lays bare the scale of the previous government's budgetary failures. The deficit is now projected at nearly $2 billion. It is the worst ever non-pandemic deficit in Manitoba's history. Total revenues are now projected to be $901 million below budget, while expenses have increased significantly. This increase in expense is largely attributable to significant and unbudgeted, that's a key part here, overspending in the healthcare bureaucracy. Since the second quarter update, the deficit has increased to $1.997 billion from $1.634 billion. This incremental increase reflects additional healthcare expenditures and provisions for the settlement of long-standing lawsuits. I want to be clear that the increases in healthcare expense were spurred by decisions made by the previous government, but were unbudgeted. They were not accounted for in Budget 2023. And they were not accounted for in the first quarterly update as we headed into the election, as we've discussed previously here in this room. As a result of this healthcare overspending, the government has launched a forensic audit of the Northern Regional Health Authority, and we will be launching comprehensive financial audits at Shared Health, as well as Winnipeg, Interlake Eastern, and Prairie Mountain Regional Health Authorities. These audits will review budgeting and spending practices to ensure that every single dollar that flows will deliver real results for Manitobans. We need to do things differently. We need to budget differently than the previous government. On April 2nd, I will deliver this government's first budget. It will close the chapter on the previous government's budgetary track record and start a new chapter where we will deliver real results for Manitobans. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
A lot of the changes seem to be compared to the last fiscal update. Seem to be on the revenue side. Taxation, tax revenues, et cetera, are down. Is that a sign of a weak economy? I'm looking at about $200 million in less revenue than the last fiscal update.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, the biggest drivers that have led to this increase in the scope of the deficit are tied to increases in healthcare expenditures that are mostly driven by collective bargaining related costs. So you'll see from the last quarterly update, there's approximately a $330 million increase in healthcare expenditures, again, mostly driven by unbudgeted collective bargaining costs. So there was a flurry of very last-minute collective bargaining agreements that were put in place prior to us arriving to government. The impacts of those collective bargaining agreements are now coming online. And the fact is, the previous government did not budget adequately for those agreements, and the impact of those agreements are starting to become fully apparent to us here, and that's really the biggest driver. The other piece here is, again, a further worsening of the situation at Hydro. We know that, as we reported in Q2, there was a significant variance from what had been projected in the budget on Hydro profits for their net income. This Q3 update reflects that situation has gotten even worse. And one thing, again, I want to highlight here is that we know that when the previous government reported the directionality of those hydro profits, they did not adequately reflect the reality of the situation. And they did that very intentionally because they wanted to hide the reality of the direction of hydro profits to create an impression that things were better than they were prior to the election. That's wrong. We need to be transparent with Manitobans, and that's why we're here today, to give more clarity on the financial picture.
The fuel tax holiday adds a little bit to the deficit in the current fiscal year, and perhaps more next year, depending on when it ends. The Premier seemed to indicate in question period yesterday that the fuel tax will never return to 14 cents a litre. Is that true? Have you made a decision as to whether to extend the tax holiday?
We made a commitment to a 6-month holiday, which we're delivering on and delivering those savings for Manitobans. In terms of the decision of how we'll move forward, that information will come at a later date.
We've got significant financial pressures, though.
We do.
Should Manitobans anticipate that, there'll be some tough decisions? Could there be tax increases in certain areas?
Yeah, well, again, what Manitobans can expect is that our government will show that we can balance the need to invest in priority areas while we find that path to balance. That's the work that we're doing. And on April 2nd, I'm looking forward to sharing more about how we're going to do that.
That was Manitoba Finance Minister Adrian Sala speaking with reporters earlier today. And you can read more about this story on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
CBC Sports is your source for sports coverage and insights you won't find anywhere else. Get the athlete's real story on the Player's Own Voice podcast, hosted by Anastasia Busis. Find Player's Own Voice on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts. And whether you're a hardcore fan or just looking to hold your own in the conversation, the Buzzer newsletter helps make you smarter about sports. Subscribe today at cbcsports.ca/thebuzzer.
Thanks for tuning in to Radio Noon this afternoon. I'm Chloe Friesen filling in for Marjorie Dowhouse. Hello to Dylan Longhurst. Behind the controls and directing the show today, and Travis Peterson, making our CBC Manitoba YouTube live stream run oh so smoothly. Thanks for tuning in. Blind and partially blind curlers from all over Western Canada are throwing rocks right now at a big competition in Edmonton. The Granite Curling Club is hosting the 50th Western Blind Curling Championship. CBC stopped by the rink this week to learn more about the game.
My name is Jerry Chevalier. I'm a member of the Edmonton Blind Curling Club for a long time, and here competing with my Edmonton Blind Curling friends in the Western Canada Blind Curling Championship. Well, we adapt the game for people's vision challenges. Some of us have some partial vision, so we have one technique for them where we stand with the broom near the shooter of the rock, as opposed to them having a target at the far end because they can't see that far. Some of them have an enhancement on the broom that they're using as their target. They might put a light on it, for example. And for people like myself that are totally blind, our teammates get us lined up square in the hack so that we're pointing straight down the ice, and then they will stand out in front of us 10, 12 feet and make, in my case, they call my name so I can walk out towards the sound. Another lady here that's totally blind, they tap the ice with their broom handle in front of her because that's a good audio cue for her. So we try to adapt different techniques for whatever works for everybody, regardless of their vision challenges. And each team also has a fully sighted person, which allows us to line up the shots and call the sweeping. That's the most important thing.
Jerry Chevalier is a blind curler taking part in the 50th Western Blind Curling Championship in Edmonton. Thanks for tuning in to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. Coming up, one of Canada's most iconic animals was once considered a fish. CBC's Blair Sanderson will explain how the beaver's prowess in the water made it permissible to eat during Lent in the 17th century. That's coming up here later on Radio Noon. But we have time for a bit of music. And we have new music out this week from Winnipeg singer-songwriter Field Guide. This one's called Rootin' For Ya.
Talking it out in the park by our house. Maybe it never gets fully worked out. Hearing the words falling out of my mouth. I don't ever wanna say goodbye. I don't ever wanna say goodbye. And isn't it strange? The love grows, the love stays. And maybe I'm a rootin' for you. I'm a rootin' for you. Maybe it's great, a long love, and it's all play. And maybe I'm a rootin' for you. I'm a rootin' for you. Going out, yeah, I'm going insane. Trying to find words that don't paint it so plain. If you were gone, I'd be never the same. And I don't ever wanna say goodbye. No, I don't ever wanna say goodbye. And isn't it
brand new music from Manitoba's own field guide that was rootin' for ya. Now, the Easter holiday might still be days away. It's on March 31st. But for many denominations of the Christian faith, this is already a special time. Lent is typically observed for 40 days leading up to Good Friday. And each Friday during this time, many followers abstain from eating meat. But did you know that in the 17th century, in parts of Canada, the beaver was considered fair game? CBC's Blair Sanderson has this look at why a Canadian icon was able to swim through a religious loophole.
Father Patrick Sala leads his congregation in a midday mass. He says in this period of Lent, Catholics reflect in preparation for Easter. And part of that reflection involves abstaining from things like chocolate, coffee, or online shopping.
Let us pray.
Father Salah says Fridays have traditionally had extra restrictions because that's the day Jesus was crucified.
Historically, as Catholics, we didn't eat meat on Fridays, and it was seen as a penance because meat in a lot of parts of the world at that time was a food associated with a feasting, a special occasion. And so it was, we're not going to do the thing that we do on special occasions on a Friday. It was a day we wanted to really observe in a certain way.
But fish, on the other hand, was often seen as a very ordinary food and was therefore okay to eat on Fridays. Which brings us to the proud and industrious animal that's become a symbol of Canada.
The beaver builds dams because he has to store his winter's food in water deep enough not to freeze.
In the 17th century, beaver was regularly consumed in parts of Canada, and so the question arose, can it be eaten on Fridays? Considering it's a mammal with 4 legs and coarse fur, one might think the answer would be no. But numerous writings by explorers and naturalists centuries ago tell a different story. That's according to Colin Coates, who's a professor of Canadian Studies at York University. He says it was well known among local populations, especially French settlers in Quebec, that it was considered quite all right to eat beaver for Lent.
It was considered that beaver could be eaten for Lent, under the principle that because they lived in water, because of their habitat, they shared habitat with fish, they could be considered a freshwater fish.
Coates points out that our current system of animal classification hadn't been developed yet, and grouping by habitat was seen as a reasonable system. It's also helpful to remember that the Catholic Church was willing to be flexible under special circumstances. That's the view of Megan Armstrong, a professor at McMaster University who specializes in early modern Catholicism.
The fact that the beaver was recognized as a fish in the 17th century by the Catholic Church tells us a number of things. I mean, first of all, it reminds us the Catholic Church was very pragmatic. As it spread, as it sought to include cultures that were very different, living in very different landscapes, they had to also plan to adapt rituals that simply could be enacted. They could still be part of the practice in the community of the church.
Fast forward to the present day, and there's not much talk about when you can and can't eat beaver. But this legacy does persist.
Hi, I'm Britton Brown with Bootleg and Barbecue. We'll be participating in the Taste of Downtown St. Louis.
This Missouri restaurant co-owner once read about the beaver's religious history in a magazine and joked with his partner about serving the rodent. And then
we actually decided to do it, and then it actually took off. People liked it. People sought it out, and so we've been doing it since I think 2016.
Brown says they typically season the meat with dry rub and then smoke it before serving. It's all part of a tradition that goes back centuries, eating beaver without being damned. For CBC Radio, I'm Blair Sanderson.
I am now so curious as to what beaver tastes like. It's not something that I've tried, but now my interest is piqued. And the beaver isn't alone, actually, in its exemption from Lent Friday meat restrictions. In Detroit, the Archbishop of that city says it's been permissible to eat muskrat since the 1700s. Wow, you learn something new every day. Now, it is Friday, so we want to kind of dance into the weekend a little bit, so it's time for some music. Now, Manitoba pop artist Quiet is putting together her debut EP right now, but she's recently shared the lead single. This is Follow the Call.
Do you hear it? Started like a hum, heard it when you were young, sounded like thunder on the horizon. What could you do? You knew what you wanted and it wanted you. It's time, the fever's here and rising. Fear it, ooh. You have what you need. Run wild and finally be free. Watch the world around you unravel. Take a leap of faith. You only move forward once the toll's been paid. And it's time to mark the path you'll travel. You need it. Attempt to forget that you feed it. You say that you're fine. Do you believe it?
It's new music from Manitoba artist Quiet. That was Follow the Call. And Quiet is actually spelled K-W-I-A-T, which, fun fact, I just learned means flower in Polish. So that's your fun fact for the day. Thanks for tuning in to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. We are coming to the end of the show, but do not fear. We've got more for you coming up on Up to Speed, where we'll hear more about Manitoba's first all-Filipino musical, which is making its Canadian premiere this summer at Rainbow Stage. Coming up on Up to Speed, we'll meet some of the cast members, including a Broadway star. Thank you to the whole team who helped put together today's show: Corey Funk, Kalkanem Malageta, Matt Humphrey, Riley Lachuk. Hello to Travis, and thank you to Travis, who has been making our YouTube live stream work so seamlessly. Tech and director, Dylan Longhurst, our show producer, Nellie Gonzalez. Nellie Gonzalez has just been doing so much. Thank you, Nellie. We really appreciate you. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Coming up next, it's your CBC Podcast Showcase.